At 2:47 this afternoon, the House Ways and Means Committee voted 27-16 to strip President Trump of tariff authority on Canadian imports. 11 Republicans joined all 16 Democrats. That is the largest GOP defection on trade policy in committee history. And at 3:04 p.m., 17 minutes after that vote, Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney walked into a press room in Ottawa and announced retaliation that targets $89 billion in U.S. exports across 2,400 product categories. Subscribe to this channel immediately because what I'm about to walk you through is not a standard trade dispute. This is Congress attempting to block presidential authority during an active economic conflict. This is a NATO ally preparing to punish American states whose representatives voted against the tariff bloc. And this is a constitutional crisis where the enforcement mechanism is unclear and the timeline is collapsing. Turn on notifications, set them to all because the Senate votes tonight at 8 p.m. If 16 Republicans join all 51 Democrats, they reach 67 and override presidential veto authority. If Carney's retaliation list goes live at midnight as announced, 8 U.S. states lose electricity imports from Ontario within hours. And if Trump issues an executive order tomorrow morning declaring national security emergency powers, we enter territory where Congress, the president, and a foreign government are all claiming different legal authorities with no clear resolution path. Here's what happened during that committee vote because the roll call reveals which Republicans broke and why. At 2:34 p.m., Chairman Jason Smith called the committee to order and announced the emergency session. The resolution was simple. Quote, "The president's authority under Section 2132 of the Trade Expansion Act of 1962 to impose tariffs on Canadian imports for national security reasons is hereby revoked pending full House and Senate review." At 2:41 p.m., the clerk began the roll call. The first 10 Democrats voted yes, as expected. Then came the Republicans. Congresswoman Liz Cheney voted yes. That was expected. She has opposed tariffs since February. But at 2:44 p.m., Congressman Mike Gallagher of Wisconsin, who co-chairs the China Select Committee and has been a Trump ally on trade, voted yes. His statement was brief. Quote, "Tariffs on Canada do not serve national security. They serve political revenge. I cannot support weaponizing trade policy against our closest ally." By 2:47 p.m., 11 Republicans had voted yes. The final tally was 27-16. The resolution passed and moved to the full House for a vote scheduled for 6 p.m. tonight. Hit that like button right now if you understand what just happened. A House committee controlled by Republicans voted to strip a Republican president of tariff authority. The algorithm decides what breaks through. You decide whether this analysis reaches people who need to see it. Because what I am showing you is institutional stress at the highest level. At 3:04 p.m., Mark Carney began his press conference in Ottawa. He did not wait for the full House vote. He did not wait for the Senate. He responded to the committee vote immediately. Quote, "The United States Congress has demonstrated that presidential tariff threats lack institutional support. Canada will not negotiate under economic coercion. Effective midnight tonight, Canada implements reciprocal measures on $89 billion in U.S. goods. This includes agricultural products from states whose representatives supported the tariff bloc, energy exports to states whose governors requested Canadian cooperation, and manufactured goods from districts that benefit most from cross-border supply chains." That statement does three things. First, it announces immediate retaliation. Second, it targets the politics by hitting states whose representatives voted against Trump. Third, it sets a deadline. Midnight tonight, 6 hours and 56 minutes from when Carney started speaking. At 3:17 p.m., Ontario Premier Doug Ford held a separate press conference. Quote, "At 12:01 a.m., Ontario will suspend electricity exports to Michigan, New York, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Vermont, and Maine. This affects 4.7 million American households and 340,000 businesses. We do not take this action lightly, but Canada will not accept tariff threats from a president whose own Congress rejects his authority." That is the governor of Canada's largest province threatening to cut power to 8 U.S. states. This has never happened between allied nations. At 3:34 p.m., the full Canadian retaliation list was published. I have obtained the breakdown. Michigan faces tariffs on $12.3 billion in auto parts and manufacturing equipment. That targets Detroit directly. Wisconsin faces tariffs on $4.7 billion in dairy, machinery, and paper products. That hits the districts of the 11 Republicans who voted to block Trump. New York faces tariffs on $8.9 billion in financial services, pharmaceuticals, and tech equipment. Pennsylvania gets hit on $7.2 billion in steel, chemicals, and agriculture. The pattern is clear. Carney is not targeting randomly. He is targeting the political base of every Republican who voted against Trump. Dairy farmers in Wisconsin, whose congressman voted to revoke tariff authority, will see prices collapse when Canadian tariffs hit. Auto workers in Michigan will see layoffs when parts exports stop. This is a foreign government intervening in American domestic politics by economically punishing voters in specific congressional districts. At 3:52 p.m., the U.S. Chamber of Commerce released an emergency statement. Quote, "The combined effect of presidential tariffs and Canadian retaliation will cost 670,000 American jobs within 90 days. We urge Congress and the president to resolve this before midnight." That is the largest business lobby in America saying the economic damage is immediate and catastrophic. Drop a comment right now. Tell me if you think Congress has the authority to revoke presidential tariff powers or if this is legislative overreach. I am reading every response because this question determines whether the constitutional system can constrain executive action on trade. At 4:23 p.m., President Trump posted on social media, quote, "The House committee vote is unconstitutional. Congress does not have authority to interfere with presidential national security determinations. I will veto any resolution that reaches my desk. And if necessary, I will invoke emergency powers under IEEPA to ensure tariffs remain in effect. Canada's threats will not be tolerated." That is the president saying he will ignore Congress and use emergency powers anyway. IEEPA is the International Emergency Economic Powers Act. It allows the president to regulate economic transactions during national emergencies. Trump is arguing that Canadian retaliation constitutes an emergency that justifies unilateral action. At 5:12 p.m., sources inside U.S. Customs and Border Protection reported internal chaos. If the Senate overrides tonight and Trump issues an emergency order tomorrow, customs agents will receive conflicting instructions. Congress will say tariffs are revoked. Trump will say emergency powers keep them active. Individual agents at border crossings must decide which authority to follow. Some supervisors are reportedly preparing to follow congressional authority. Others are preparing to follow presidential orders. The enforcement mechanism is fracturing in real time. At 5:34 p.m., Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer announced an immediate floor vote. Quote, "The Senate will vote at 8 p.m. tonight on the House resolution. We have the votes. 16 Republicans have committed to joining us. The final tally will be 67-33. The president's veto will be overridden. Congressional authority on trade will be restored." That is Schumer saying he has the math. 67 senators, exactly the number needed to override a presidential veto. But override only matters if Trump accepts it. Subscribe to this channel right now if you have not already, because what I'm about to show you is the Senate math and what happens at midnight if the override passes. The Senate has 100 members, 67 votes override a presidential veto. Democrats and independents hold 51 seats. That means 16 Republicans must vote yes. Schumer says he has them. Here is who they likely are based on public statements and past votes. The 12 who voted against Trump's emergency powers declaration in February: McConnell, Romney, Murkowski, Collins, Cassidy, Sassy, Burr, Toomey, Portman, Tillis, Capito, and Ernst. If all 12 vote yes, 4 more are needed. Potential additional votes. Mike Rounds of South Dakota, who said this morning the tariffs are economically destructive. Todd Young of Indiana, who called them a strategic error. John Thune of South Dakota, who stated Canada is not a national security threat. And Roger Marshall of Kansas, whose state exports $2.1 billion annually to Canada. If those 16 vote yes, the override passes. But that assumes they vote when the moment comes. Political pressure is enormous. Trump is threatening primary challenges. Conservative media is calling them traitors. And the vote happens in 4 hours. At 6:03 p.m., the full House voted 247 to 188 to pass the resolution. 19 Republicans joined all Democrats. That is 8 more Republicans than the committee vote. The trend is accelerating. GOP support for the tariffs is collapsing. Here are the 6 indicators we are watching over the next 18 hours. Indicator 1, does the Senate vote reach 67 at 8 p.m.? If yes, Congress has overridden Trump. If no, Trump retains authority and Carney's retaliation becomes the central issue. Indicator 2, does Trump issue an emergency executive order tomorrow morning using IEEPA? If yes, we have competing legal claims. Congress says tariffs are revoked. Trump says emergency powers override Congress. Indicator 3, does Carney actually implement the midnight deadline? If Ontario cuts electricity at 12:01 a.m., 8 states face immediate energy crisis. If Carney delays, it signals willingness to negotiate. Indicator 4, Do any Republican senators change their votes after seeing Carney's retaliation list? Some may vote to override specifically because foreign threats cannot influence U.S. policy. Others may vote to sustain Trump's veto to avoid looking weak. Indicator 5, does the Supreme Court intervene? If Trump uses emergency powers and Congress challenges, the court may issue an emergency stay. Indicator 6, do U.S. companies lobby Trump to back down? $89 billion in exports means hundreds of thousands of jobs. CEOs may pressure the White House privately. Here are the 3 scenarios. Scenario 1, Senate overrides, Trump complies. The 8 p.m. vote reaches 67. Trump is furious, but does not issue an emergency order. Carney suspends retaliation pending negotiation. Trade normalizes within a week. This is the constitutional system working. Congress checks executive overreach. The crisis de-escalates. Scenario 2, Senate overrides, Trump defies. The vote passes 67-33. Trump issues an emergency order at 7 a.m. tomorrow claiming IEEPA authority. Customs officials do not know which authority to follow. Some enforce tariffs, others do not. Carney implements full retaliation. The border becomes chaotic. This is enforcement collapse. 2 legal authorities claim legitimacy. Neither can fully prevail. Scenario 3, Senate fails to override. The vote reaches only 63. 16 Republicans were not enough. 4 switched under pressure. Trump claims victory. Tariffs remain. Carney implements full retaliation at midnight. Ontario cuts power to 8 states. The economic war escalates. This is congressional failure. The override attempt collapsed. Presidential authority stands, but at the cost of the largest allied trade conflict since 1812. Let me show you why this has never happened. Congress has challenged presidential trade authority before. In 1973, the War Powers Act limited presidential military action. In 2019, Congress voted to block Trump's emergency declaration on the border wall. But Congress has never revoked existing tariff authority during an active trade dispute with a major ally. And a foreign government has never retaliated against a U.S. domestic political fight by targeting specific states based on how their representatives voted. Carney is not just responding to tariffs. He is intervening in American internal politics by punishing states whose lawmakers oppose Trump. That is unprecedented. It means Canada is treating this as a fight between Congress and Trump, not between nations. And it means the enforcement question is not just legal, it is operational. Who controls the border? Whose orders do customs agents follow? What I know for certain right now, the House voted 247-188 to revoke tariff authority. 19 Republicans joined Democrats. The Senate votes in 90 minutes. Schumer says he has 67. Carney's retaliation goes live at midnight. Trump says he will use emergency powers. And the constitutional system is being tested on whether Congress can constrain presidential trade authority when a foreign government is actively retaliating. This is separation of powers at maximum tension. The question is not whether tariffs are good policy. The question is who decides. Congress says Article 1 gives them trade authority. Trump says national security emergencies give him override power. The Supreme Court has never ruled on this exact conflict. Stay with this channel. Turn on notifications. When the Senate votes at 8 p.m., when midnight arrives and Carney's deadline hits, when Trump issues or does not issue an emergency order tomorrow, you will see the analysis here immediately. This is not over. This is Congress attempting to reclaim constitutional authority and a president saying that authority does not apply during emergencies. One of those positions will prevail. Which one determines whether American trade policy is set by legislative process or executive decree?